I think that this image here gives a hint at the contentious topic that I chose. The Super Mario Bros. On capital punishment, where Mario says that the death penalty is immoral and has no place in modern society, and Luigi says, "Cook that crook." So if you didn't know, I chose the topic of capital punishment or death penalty in the US. So the capital punishment law was a law that allowed for the legal execution of convicted felons for heinous crimes. It's a practice that's been done since the 1800s, where Pennsylvania was the first state to make the switch from public executions to correctional facilities. However, in recent times, this topic has gained more and more traction and is a fairly split debate amongst US states. 25 out of the 50 states in the US still have an active capital punishment system. The debate for or against capital punishment poses some unique concerns and is far from a black and white decision. Some of those who are for capital punishment choose a stance based off three chief points. 1. They claim it's cheaper than a lifetime incarceration. 2. The families are allowed retribution and peace of mind. And 3. It deters major crimes. However, the argument against capital punishment responds to these points and comes to a similar conclusion as U.S. Justice Lewis F. Powell, that capital punishment should be abolished because it serves no useful purpose. The main points in this argument respond to those that are for the death penalty, arguing that in fact the death penalty is not cheaper than life behind bars, and in fact it does not deter major crimes. However, in my blog, I focus more on the psychological aspect that the death penalty has on individuals associated with carrying out the verdict. In my opening paragraph, I use the pathos appeal in the rhetorical triangle that places the reader in both positions of for and against the death penalty. When reading about this topic, I found that I was already leaning towards one side, against the death penalty. However, when I looked at the issue from both perspectives, I saw, and I hope for my reader to see, that this issue was not so simple. In an article about the death penalty, I read that one inmate that was sentenced to death by electric chair lived for 14 minutes while bursting into a cloud of flames and smoke. The executioners checked each time if the felon had died. However, after intermittent checking for signs of life followed up by electricity being ran through his body, he suffered for 14 minutes, while those in the waiting room were scarred for life. Taking a step back, during the time of conviction when a man or woman was sentenced to death, the people affected by the crime are obviously the victims and the victim's family. However, some fail to notice that jurors and judges are the overlooked victims as well. A study was done by the Capital Jury Project, which interviewed over 1,000 public servants that acted as jurors for capital punishment verdicts. They found that 63% of female and 38% of male jurors sought after counseling for fear of developing post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, so a question you might be asking is, why does this matter to me? Canada doesn't have any active death penalty laws. That's right, Canada doesn't. But let me offer a situation to you. Imagine you and your family are taking a trip to Houston, Texas, a state with active capital punishment. And fast forward, the murderer is convicted and sentenced to death. I feel that most of you would be rightfully so in seeking retribution. However, would those same people want the same outcome, with the knowledge that those people involved in the verdict would seek counseling after a life-altering experience? If it weren't abolished today, would you advocate for or against capital punishment in Waterloo? In order to enter the conversation, I used some help from the They Say I Say template from the Graf Bergstein text. I used this template in order to convey both sides of the argument and included a snippet from a quote by a California governor. So if you look here, I have some dialogue that allows for the perspectives of both sides of the argument without bias or opinionated language. However, once I explain to the reader both sides of the debate, I go on to talk about my opinion in this section of the blog. I further narrow down my point to focus in on the psychological impact that the death penalty has on overlooked people and how ultimately more victims are created in the process. Although my topic doesn't have the same implications if I were to apply it to life in Kitchener-Waterloo and Laurier, I feel that I portrayed the importance of this topic despite the laws that differ from Canadians versus Americans.